Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I offer my thoughts on Joe Biden's fitness to be President of the United States? Is he too old to be President? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of Joe Biden, move to a timeline of some of his unusual behavior, then offer my analysis. At the time of making this video, Joe Biden is the current President of the United States. He is the 46th President. He has had a long political career. He served in the U.S. Senate from 1973 to 2009, representing the state of Delaware, the first state. And he was the Vice President of the United States from 2009 to 2017. When Joe Biden was first elected to the Senate, he was only 29 years old, which meant he was the sixth youngest senator in U.S. history. When Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump in the 2020 presidential election, he became the oldest person to assume the presidency in U.S. history. Joe Biden turns 80 years old in November 2022. There are a variety of concerns about his fitness to be president, both at a cognitive level and at a physical level. These concerns remain even when accounting for Joe Biden's low approval rating. Let's take a look at a number of the unusual behaviors and mistakes of Joe Biden during the time he has been president. These have been highlighted by many to call his mental acuity into question. Again, these are just from his presidency. If I were to list all of the mistakes that he made during his political career, I would have to work past my retirement. In early March 2021, Joe Biden could not remember the name of his Secretary of Defense. Later in March 2021, Joe Biden introduced Vice President Kamala Harris as President Harris. There is the sense that Joe Biden realized that there had been a recent election. He knew that somebody was elected president, but he just could not be positive about who that was. He made his best guess, and he was close to being correct. Very close. During the G7 summit in June 2021, Joe Biden interrupted British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and reminded him to introduce the President of South Africa. The only problem is that Boris had already introduced the South African president. In September 2021, Biden falsely claimed that he visited a synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where 11 people had been murdered in 2018. The White House was forced to admit that Joe Biden's statement was false. They said he was referring to a phone call and not an in-person visit. In January 2022, Joe Biden falsely claimed that he had been arrested for civil rights activism. It's not clear if he was lying or if he just doesn't remember that he was not arrested. Later in January 2022, Joe Biden responded to a reporter who asked him about inflation being a political liability. Joe Biden said, "No, it's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a blank." During a speech in March of 2022, Joe Biden demanded that Vladimir Putin be removed from power. The White House quickly corrected his statement, saying that Joe really didn't mean what he said. Later in March 2022, Joe Biden claimed that his policies promoting clean electricity would save homeowners about $500 a month on average. The correct figure was $500 a year. In May 2022, Joe Biden forgot that he was President of the United States when he referred to himself as a senator. This mistake is certainly understandable. Many people wish they could forget Joe Biden was president. In August 2022, Joe Biden finished a speech and tried to shake hands with the empty space next to him. He appeared to be somewhat confused. On September 21, 2022, Joe Biden became lost on stage after delivering a speech, like he was just wandering around for a bit. During a speech on September 28, 2022, Joe Biden attempted to acknowledge a Republican representative named Jackie Walorski. He said, "Jackie, are you here? Where's Jackie?" The only problem for Joe Biden is that Jackie died during a motor vehicle collision a month earlier. He should have known this because he released a statement about her death. In addition to all these incidents I've talked about, Joe Biden has misspoken a number of times. Just a few examples. He was trying to talk about the strength of the Ukrainian people, and he said Iranian people. He He used the word honor instead of horror when referring to the Holocaust, and he talked about soldiers being selfish instead of selfless. There is the sense that people who assist Joe Biden must be nervous all the time, waiting for his next mistake. Perhaps they should receive hazardous duty pay. Now moving to my analysis. Is Joe Biden too old to be president of the United States? There has never been a president older than Joe Biden. Ronald Reagan was 77 when he left office. Joe Biden is still in office, and he is already 79. In my opinion, the age of a president does not matter as much as the condition that they are in. I've seen people in their 90s who are as sharp as a tack, and I've seen people in their 30s who were frequently confused. There is definitely such a thing as highway miles versus city miles when it comes to human lifestyles. Certain experiences will age people prematurely and dramatically, like alcohol and drug consumption, spending time in prison, and watching the Kardashians. Again, I don't think that age is a big deal, which means we have to look specifically at Joe Biden's condition to answer the question. There are three main concerns with somebody serving as president as they grow older. The first one is mortality, that is, will they continue to live? The second is physical performance, like can they keep up with all of the activity? And the third is mental acuity, are they cognitively able to do the job? As far as mortality, Joe Biden appears to be in pretty good shape. According to a 2020 research study, Joe Biden's estimated life expectancy is 96 years old. He has a 66% chance of making it to 85. There are a number of reasons for this. He has a family history of longevity, he is physically active, and he has no identifiable lethal conditions. Statistically, Joe Biden is expected to outlive Donald Trump, despite the fact that Joe is 3 years older than Donald. Moving to the second category, physical performance, Joe Biden has certainly had his shares of stumbling incidents as he walks up steps and things like that, but it's not really clear that any physical limitations or disabilities he has would prevent him from acting as president. For his age, he is in pretty good physical condition, and most presidents do not have to lift heavy boxes or climb ladders as part of their job, although the travel component can certainly be physically demanding. The third category is cognitive health. This is the one that is of concern to many people. I'm not aware of anything major wrong cognitively with Joe Biden. Some people have talked about dementia, but there's not a lot of evidence to support that conclusion. Joe appears to have some reasoning and memory limitations that are consistent with his age. Of all the Joe Biden mistakes, the ones that are the most worrisome involve his aggressiveness with reporters and how he is easily confused. It's clear that his performance in the areas of reasoning and memory are impaired. It's hard to imagine how he is fit to be president under these circumstances. Now, some people argue that Joe Biden may be cantankerous even without any cognitive decline. For that matter, he may get confused easily without cognitive problems. For example, he has a history of gaffes going back decades. Maybe this is simply who Joe Biden is. This is a behavior that is typical for him. This is a good argument, but I think the nature of Joe Biden's limitations has changed over the years. For instance, I don't recall any instances from years ago where he forgot that somebody was dead. It's one thing to have a momentary slip in memory, but this seems quite different. Now, some people look at the memory problems and say, well, it's not a big deal because Joe Biden is surrounded by advisors. He may make mistakes in the short run, like becoming confused or forgetting something, but when he sits down to make a decision, he will be supplied all the information that he needs. He will have a lot of time to make a careful and reasoned decision, and he's capable of doing that. Even if one were to accept this argument, there's another problem evident in the situation. Joe Biden appears to have a lack of insight about his cognitive limitations. Most people who have some decrease in cognitive performance readily acknowledge that they have difficulty. They may say something like, "I'm not as sharp as I used to be." There is an awareness of the memory problems, and this awareness becomes compensatory. Because the person is aware, they can take steps to mitigate any damage the cognitive limitations could cause. Joe Biden does not appear to be aware that his performance has decreased, and he's puzzled why anyone would believe that. For example, during an interview on 60 Minutes in September of 2022, Joe Biden was asked to comment about those challenging his fitness. He said, "Watch me." He did not seem to realize that watching him has led to people being concerned. Did he think that people were questioning his fitness because they heard a rumor about him? People have been watching him, and they don't like what they're seeing. Joe Biden is invalidating all the feelings of people who are legitimately concerned. Another possibility could be this. Joe Biden is aware, but he is making a futile attempt to deceive people. Either way represents a problem. If Joe Biden would simply acknowledge that he has some memory problems and reveal safeguards which have been put in place to compensate, that would be a different story. Joe Biden is more defensive of his performance than he is accepting of it. I believe Joe Biden must recognize the cognitive decline to some extent, but he doesn't respect the American people enough to be honest. He may feel as though being president is his destiny or his right, like it was his turn to be president, and he's not going to let the reality of aging steal it from him. He's never let reality get in the way of his ambition before. Why start now? One thing I find curious about Joe Biden's decision is how he's hurting his own political agenda by not acknowledging the truth. Some people say he's toughing it out to advance a Democrat agenda, but he's not helping his own party by doing this. Joe Biden's lack of insight isn't the only concern in this situation. Another problem is how it changes the dynamic of his interactions with people around him. As a person's cognitive performance decreases, sometimes they become more agreeable as a compensatory strategy. That is, they depend more on the people around them and don't assert their will anymore. They don't challenge anyone or hold anyone accountable. This isn't normally a major problem, but if someone is the president, it's important that they are actually making their own decisions, not just giving in to helpers and other people who advise them. If Joe Biden were to become too agreeable, people could push him around in any direction. That's a good thing if he's threatening to blow up the world or something, but it's a bad thing in the sense that people did not elect his aides to the presidency. They elected Joe Biden. If Joe Biden's cognitive performance declines more than it has already, who is really going to be running the country? As long as Joe Biden continues to give speeches and make mistakes, for him those two activities are inseparable, there probably isn't too much to worry about. When his helpers start hiding him, that is the time when people should be a little bit more concerned about who is actually in charge of the country. Moving to the next question, should Joe Biden run again in 2024, and will he run? Based on the many items I've covered in this video, I don't think that Joe Biden should run in 2024. But will he run again is a much different question. People who want to be president are typically ambitious, so it wouldn't surprise me if he wanted to, and it wouldn't surprise me if he did. I think that Joe Biden would be very easy to defeat if his challenger was a somewhat normal politician, someone without extreme personality characteristics like Donald Trump. Which brings me to my next item. Some people have said that Joe Biden has been a better president than Donald Trump because Trump is so narcissistic. This is a lesser of two evils argument. Sure, Joe Biden may misspeak continually, and sometimes he may not even realize he's president, but that's better than a person who has a sense of entitlement. The problem is every president is narcissistic to some extent. The narcissism just expresses differently for each one. One could argue that being aware of a decrease in cognitive performance and pretending like it's not happening is selfish, arrogant, grandiose, and consistent with a sense of entitlement. I think it's a perfectly acceptable position to dislike both Joe Biden and Donald Trump, to look at both of them and say, America can do better. America can find a president who is a little bit less narcissistic. Now moving to my final thoughts. Many careers are associated with a mandatory retirement age. Being a politician is not one of them. It has always been understood that if a politician becomes unable to perform their job, they should step down. But it's not always that simple. What happens if the politician's desire to do the right thing is less potent than their narcissism, or if they are truly unaware of their own limitations? Will someone have the courage and ability to declare them unfit? Will somebody see an opportunity to manipulate them in a vulnerable state? Questions like these put voters in a terrible position. All things being equal, older candidates have more experience and wisdom, but age also comes with certain risks. The fundamental problem is that the same narcissism that drives someone to run for president will prevent them from admitting that they have limitations. This is an unfortunate reality of presidential politics. Those are my thoughts on the fitness of Joe Biden. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.